Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. For those listening right now, we're going to wait a few more minutes to start, but I'll share some meeting procedures while we wait for a few more people. We expect this meeting to be about 20 minutes, so it shouldn't take up too much of your time tonight, we hope, but we are appreciative of everyone who's been able to tune in and watch. For those familiar with our usual consultation process, we really did love the ability to meet people in person in their community and to really sit down one-on-one and show you the maps for your specific property and talk about these draft maps and really talk to you about where you've seen flooding and erosion and really dig into what these maps might mean for you and for your property. Obviously, we're not able to do that this year, so we are hosting this meeting online. And while you can still ask us questions on the call, what we're going to do instead is we're going to be providing a reservation link where if you still have questions at the end of the presentation, we'll just ask you to fill out a short form to pick a time to meet with us so that we can talk about your particular property in detail and privately. Meetings can occur in person with appropriate COVID-19 precautions in place, or by phone, or through an online meeting like this where we can digitally, zoom in and zoom out on your property maps, for example. We'll leave this obviously to your preference and hopefully make sure that you've had a chance to watch this meeting first before booking a time with us. For logistic purposes, we have two presenters tonight from the South Nation Conservation Authority, myself, John Messman, and I'm joined by my colleague, Allison McDonald. And we'll be delivering our presentation by sharing our screens in a virtual meeting in Microsoft Teams and broadcasting to our YouTube channel, which means if you're watching live right now, it should be through our YouTube page. And since we are broadcasting it, just know that there will be, about a minute of lag time. I say this because we do have the comments open on the video. So if you do have questions for us while we present, you're welcome to drop them there. And one of us or one of our team members working in the background will try and answer it on the chat. If we can't, or if we don't have time, that's fine. We'll try and address them at the end of the presentation or follow up directly with you afterwards if all goes well. So just know if you drop a comment, it might take a bit of time for us to be able to address it on the video. I also want to draw your attention to the video description. There is a website link that will direct you back to our South Nation webpage at nation.on.ca. On this webpage, you'll see some additional project details, including copies of the draft maps and also our presentation package. You're welcome to download this if you're interested, but we will go through each of those slides in our presentation on this video. If you have internet connectivity issues, you're also welcome to download that slide deck and follow along with our audio. Or you're welcome to come back to the project page later and rewatch this meeting, as we will try and post the video right to the webpage tomorrow, assuming we don't have any technical difficulties here. You'll also see some additional resources posted on this webpage, including extra fact sheets and guides that further explain how floodplain maps are created, how these areas are regulated, and how permitting works, as well as some additional information on how to prepare for a potential flood or how to clean up after a flood, including some tips on how to manage your well and septic system if you're on private services. And I just want to make sure that my slide deck is working. This website, presentation, draft maps, and resources are also available in French online. Ce site est également disponible en français. Il suffit de cliquer sur l'onglet français en haut de la page de notre site web et vous pourrez également accéder à toutes les informations en français. Pour sauver du temps ce soir, nous allons partager uniquement la présentation en anglais dans cette vidéo. Cependant, nous avons téléchargé une présentation en français avec quelques notes si vous êtes intéressé à suivre en français. Vous pouvez cliquer sur la description de cette vidéo, cliquer sur le lien qui vous mènera à notre site web, cliquer sur la version en français et télécharger les notes de présentation en français. De plus, si vous avez des questions par la suite ou si vous souhaitez de nous parler directement en français, nous pouvons facilement mettre en place un moment pour parler. And with that, just looking at the time here, I think we'll get started. So I wanted to say welcome, everyone, to our public meeting for our updated natural hazard mapping in the Findlay Creek and North Castor River area in the city of Ottawa. A quick note, we do have other public meetings going on this week for other streams in our regions. However, this meeting is specific to the Findlay Creek and North Castor River area. Everyone who owns property within or adjacent to the area in our draft maps would have received a letter from us a few weeks ago with the invitation to attend this meeting. or to speak directly with our staff. The draft maps were also included with these letters. If you didn't receive a letter or are on this call, you're still welcome to participate and ask questions as you see fit. I'm going to kick off our meeting with a few comments about our organization, the South Nation Conservation Authority, just to give you a bit of an overview on who we are and what we do, so you can better understand how and why we were contracted by our municipal partners to complete these sorts of projects and floodplain mapping updates. Once I'm done, I'll pass the hot seat here over to my colleague Allison to explain a bit about natural hazards, why and how we map them, and how we work with property owners and municipalities to ensure that future construction projects in and near these areas are reviewed and approved so that they can protect people and property and support good and safe development activities. We'll also end the presentation by showing some of the draft maps on the screen and walk you through a few examples that will hopefully answer some of your questions. I'll start with a quick map up on screen of our watershed jurisdiction. We are one of Ontario's 36 conservation authorities, and we operate under provincial legislation called the Conservation Authorities Act. But we also deliver other work through agreements with provincial ministries and our own municipalities to deliver environmental services through other pieces of legislation like the Clean Water Act, among others. In our region in Eastern Ontario, we work for 16 different municipalities, including the City of Ottawa, and our jurisdiction is around the South Nation River and its tributaries, which begin near our headwaters in Brockville and end up in Plantagenet, where the river empties into the Ottawa River. You'll also notice in the map that our jurisdiction extends to both the St. Lawrence and Ottawa rivers. These are recent developments over the last few years where we've extended our jurisdiction to these rivers at the request of our municipalities to help deliver environmental services, especially floodplain mapping and flood forecasting in these areas. And this, of course, is in response to some of the significant and historic flood events that we've seen in 2017 and 2019 in these areas. Which means, though we work as watershed managers to deliver environmental services for our municipalities, you can expect that one of the most important parts of our job is to protect people and property from natural hazards like flooding, erosion, and landslides. Through this, we do deliver several services on behalf of our municipal partners, including septic inspections, drinking water source protection, while also operating 8 different dams and other water control structures, and also managing a flood forecasting program to help predict and respond to flood events. The landslide photo we include in this slide is from the area between the village of Castleman and the former village of Lemieux, where significant erosion occurs due to the presence of laid clay soil in the area. This clay soil can turn from solid to liquid in a matter of seconds. For example, this is an area that has been susceptible to large-scale landslides for centuries and has seen really significant events in the 70s and 90s. This area was mapped by us and is regulated by us to limit development in the area. In the 90s, we also worked to relocate the former village of Lemieux, and we were successful in moving all of those village residents at the time and their homes just 1 year before the landslide occurred. That's in that photo there. Like the landslide area, our staff also work to map floodplains and erosion hazards in other areas identified by our municipalities with increased development pressure to ensure that whatever new buildings are approved are being built in the safest way possible. When our staff review development files and proposals, and Allison's going to share a few examples in just a bit, we're not always looking to restrict development like we would in the Castleman to Lemieux area. Our staff are working with the property owner, the developer, and the municipality to find ways to approve projects by recommending floodproofing measures, different locations for buildings, and safe construction techniques. We want to make sure that we're able to approve development that's going to protect you and also your investment, your property, and the buildings you construct on them. We also do complete environmental monitoring programs that help us report on watershed conditions and environmental health. And there are reports on our website that you're welcome to review. But our planning and regulations team also use this data to make informed decisions when we review these development proposals. When we know that an area, for example, is in poor environmental health, we also do our best to work with our municipalities and the affected property owners to help improve the environment through restoration projects. On this, I do want to share a note, and though we're very proud of the restoration work that we do every year, we do rely on fundraising and financial project partnerships to help fund this sort of work. And we've been grateful to have partners like the City of Ottawa and agencies like Ontario Power Generation to fund some of this work in the past. We also deliver a number of different environmental stewardship programs through agreements with our counties and municipalities. including things like roadside tree programs, water quality improvement programs for farmers that offer cost share funding, and an ash tree replacement program for the City of Ottawa. And probably our most popular program being our tree planting program, which is often what people know us most for. Our tree planting program is now funded by the federal government and the private property owners that participate. And we are able to offer a variety of services, including tending, spraying, and tree planting for as low as 20 cents per conifer or 50 cents per deciduous tree with larger orders. Should you have questions, please feel free to give us a call anytime. I did want to insert this plug because we have set a bit of an ambitious record for ourselves this year. We're hoping to plant 200,000 trees next year in 2021. And as of today, we have about 170,000 trees reserved. So we're still looking for people with land interested to plant trees on. So if this interests you, feel free to connect with us later. A final slide for our overview. We wanted to mention that we are also a public land trust, and we work to protect significant natural spaces in Eastern Ontario. And we have been acquiring land since about 1970 through partial purchase and donation. Many of these properties were also acquired for flood mitigation, including areas to construct berms and dikes, and some areas were acquired to keep them from being developed, like areas within the Castleman to Lemieux potential retrogressive landslide area. We do own over 13,000 acres of forested land, and we operate about 15 different day-use parks. We call these parks conservation areas, and I did want to mention that most of our parks are actually on land that was donated to us by people to help protect and conserve their family's natural legacy. For more information, please feel free to check out our website and look up the land donation program if you're interested. An area closest to those tuning in tonight is actually the Lichen Wetland, where we do have the Findlay Creek Conservation Area, which provides boardwalk access to one of the most, unique and protected provincially significant wetlands in Eastern Ontario. And with that, I do want to move our presentation into the natural hazard mapping update section. And for that, I'm going to pass things off virtually to Allison to kick us off.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting us into your homes. Usually we're meeting with you out at the halls and schools in your community, but as of tonight, you get to sit at home and we get to visit you there virtually. So this is my first time doing a virtual presentation, and as John said, we'd be happy to answer questions or meet with you after the fact to make sure that we get to engage with you fully and properly. So my role here at the organization is managing the approvals department, and we look after planning, regulations, and other permitting activity. And we're here to talk tonight about natural hazard mapping. So natural hazard mapping identifies both floodplain and erosion type hazards on the land in the communities that we live and work in. Floodplains specifically are low-lying areas near watercourses that are naturally subject to flooding. And you can see an example from Winchester Springs of some flooding that occurred there in 2017. An erosion hazard is an area that's potentially subject to retrogression. So essentially in the photo, you can see as well the land kind of sliding, eroding away, losing land. So that is another type of hazard that we regulate as well. And this can be due to geologic, seismic, hydrologic, or man-made factors. Next slide. So South Nation actually maps hazards on behalf of member municipalities to ensure that all new development is safe and also to protect people and property that are within these hazard areas. We update our mapping when requested or where we feel it's necessary, and we follow provincially mandated standards to determine these areas. Next slide. The natural hazard maps are used by municipalities to update their official plan and zoning schedules. And so these schedules are if you're familiar with zoning, it gives people notice of where these hazards are. It's very important when people are purchasing property or looking to do construction or development on property that this information be there so people can make good decisions and safe decisions about their investments. We update these natural hazard maps specifically in areas that face increased development, that are under greater development pressure, or also in urban areas where we're either missing this information or it happens to be out of date. Some of the floodplain mapping is older, and there's some new technology, which we'll talk about in a couple slides, that help improve the accuracy of this information. Next slide. So how do we map natural hazards? Well, it's actually a combination of computer modeling and on-the-ground field work. So we do, oh, go back. We do background data gathering. We look at the land uses, we look at topography, we go and look at the streams and measure the actual flows within the streams. We look at precipitation information. Then we go out, as you can see in the picture here, one of our team members out collecting survey information at different culverts and bridges, places that create pinch points. We also use LiDAR, which is a fancy topography imagery called light detection and ranging, which gives us really great accuracy for topography, so we can almost make a model of the surface of the area. We then take that and put it all into a computer model and calculate what kind of a stream flow would happen under different precipitation events. And all of this is peer reviewed. So we have a great engineering team that does all this work, including field work and modeling, but then we have it reviewed by another set of engineers just to make sure that everything looks good. Next slide. So in these areas that are hazardous, we do have a permitting department who looks after any kind of development or site alteration that goes on in the hazard. So any kind of development project going on within the hazard or the regulated area would require a permit from us before proceeding. And the reason we do permits is to make sure that the development proceeds safely, make sure people understand what the hazard is and especially where it is. Often that's the first step, going out and making sure you know where that line is on the property that defines a floodplain from a safe area. And then, as John mentioned, recommending different kinds of floodproofing standards and construction standards to make sure that the development is safe. We also protect the upstream and downstream people living, so how your development might impact other people within the area, and also make sure that the environment is looked after as well. So when you identify a natural hazard area, it then becomes part of the CA permitting process. Next slide. I think I'll pass it back to John, who's going to talk about how we worked on the map specifically for Findlay Creek.
Yeah, and I think just while the maps are up, I'll run through a bit of a project timeline for those who are interested. Obviously, most of you would have received a letter from us with a map, but many of you would have also received letters from us last year. You might have spoken to us directly, or we might have met you on site. And this is, as Allison mentioned, to support some of that on-the-ground surveying that was required. So we did have to go out and request access or permission to access private property in the study area, and everyone did provide access. So there's lots of you that might have already engaged with us in the past or received letters, and that would be what that's for. Just on a timeline, we did send out those letters last year in May, so 2019, and most of that work was done by our staff or contractors in June and July of 2019. But there were also some spot surveys that we needed to go back out this year and verify what the model output was, or make sure that we were, generally content with the output that we were getting. So there were a few sites that our staff went out this year, but largely most of that field work took place last year. The majority of the computer modeling, which used the variety of techniques that Allison mentioned, was done in about the fall and winter of 2019. And we did work on preparing a report that summarized all of this early this year in 2020. That report, as Allison mentioned, went out for peer review in about March. We made a few adjustments, went back out and explored some alternatives. And that whole kind of timeline brings us to where we are today. We've gone out, we've done some draft maps, we've made some adjustments, we've met with people, we've surveyed about 17 different structures, and which all contributed to the model that we have here. There are also portions of this area where there were some old maps that needed to be updated, specifically for the North Castor River. And there were also portions of the study area where there was no existing floodplain map, specifically in the Findlay Creek area, that needed to be explored. In total, there was about 7,855 meters of stream that were newly mapped in Findlay Creek, and that's this map here. We've got the Findlay Creek Village up here, and I think if I go to the next slide, that's the close-up of the village. So between this area and here, we've got about 7,000 meters of stream that were mapped. And on the next slide, we've included the North Castor River, which is much longer, about 17,362 meters of stream that were remapped for that area. In total, between the two areas, there's about 236 different properties between the two study areas. And as you can expect, there's most of the property owners are in the Findlay Creek area, since the area is already mostly developed in some portions. And when we look at the North Castor River, we are dealing with a lot of farm use on the landscape that already exists. So there's a few less landowners rather in this area. And what I'm hoping we can do now is I'm going to pass it back to Allison to explain kind of how we calculated this map, and we'll pop back to the maps to run through a few examples for you.
Perfect. So we do use a provincial standard, as I mentioned, to define our flood and erosion hazard areas. And for flooding, it's actually the 100-year flood event. So this is the major flood, which has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. So it doesn't mean you're only going to get one every 100 years. It does mean that every year there's a 1% chance of that flood occurring. And the 100-year erosion rate is fairly similar, but it's essentially the predicted erosion distance over the course of 100 years. So that occurs on a long time scale and potentially slowly over time, or could occur in kind of larger events over time, depending on the geology of the site. So those two hazards are mapped by our engineers, but using standards that are consistent across the province of Ontario. Next slide. So how to determine and make sense of some of the lines you might see on the map. You'll see a flooding hazard line, and that's the extent of that 100-year flood. So that's where that flood will go to on the property if it's on your property and you're looking at the line. And then you're going to see the regulated area line. So that's generally a 15-meter setback from that floodplain hazard. The erosion hazard is generally contained within that as well. So this whole area becomes a regulated area, and that's an area where our permits apply. So we grant permission for work in that area if you can meet our policies for safety. And the purpose of that program, again, is just to make sure that people are aware and that development that occurs is safe. Next slide.
And to maybe give an example here, I mean, this is not a real floodplain map, but we just did this for illustration purposes to give you an understanding of how that regulation limit is calculated, and it's going to be the greater hazard. So in many areas we're going to have a floodplain hazard and potentially an erosion hazard, and when we set that regulation limit, we're looking for the greater hazard. But through planning and permitting, and Allison's team's role is they're looking for the specifics of the construction or the development or the proposal, right? There are some activities, and maybe Allison can give some examples where that might be safe in a regulated buffer, or that might be safe in a floodplain, but it might not be safe in an erosion hazard based on the slope or whatever, right? So when we have that regulation area, it's going to be whatever the biggest hazard is. And when you see it on our Geoportal online, if you'd like, once these are approved, they get added to our online mapping portal. We don't include the different layers. So we're not going to publish the floodplain and the erosion. We're just going to publish the regulated area. And then obviously, just give us a call and we can talk more about, what that actually means for your property. And I think, Allison, maybe could we walk through a few examples? Maybe let's go back to the map and go through a scenario here.
Yeah, so the map's going to be somewhat tiny, but we can use our imagination. So a lot of the properties, a lot of the existing homes are within that upper reach area of Findlay Creek. And so for a lot of those people, the actual floodplain is contained within that channel that's behind the homes. And so the floodplain hazard is not extending onto people's property. However, the back half of the property is within the regulated area. So let's say someone wanted to go and do some landscaping. So the first question is, do you need a permit? I'm going to say you're always going to need to come and check if you need a permit and have a conversation with us. We have free pre-consultation. We have screening services and property inquiry services if you're a legal professional, a real estate professional, and you need formal information in writing. We have a ton of services around this to help you get the information you need. So first of all, yes, come and talk to us. But generally, if the impact is low, let's say putting some paving stones, that's not the type of activity that's going to be restricted or prohibited in any way. Placing of a small amount of fill, that's not something that's going to be restricted. What we're looking for is things that really would have a negative impact on either the flooding on your own property or the flooding upstream or downstream. For erosion, it's fairly similar. So like low impact, small alterations just need to have a quick conversation. Some of them will require a permit, but there's no restrictions. However, for people that, for example, do own property that has floodplain hazard on it, that's where development could be restricted. So if it's actually within a floodplain area, those are the conversations that need to start early if there are development plans for those lands. So generally, if you're in a regulated area and you're looking at doing small alterations in general landscaping, a permit may be required, but there'd be no restrictions on what you're doing there. So it's very case by case. And I guess the best thing I could say is we have a really, really great, friendly team that's always here to help you understand and to give you very specific details about your property or your proposal that you have in mind. So always reach out, feel free to reach out to our department for that.
And I wanted to put up the North Castor River slide because obviously, agriculture is the biggest land use right now in that area. And so obviously, when it comes to agriculture, these sorts of regulations or policies that don't impact your farm in any way, shape, or form, right? You can continue to do what you're doing on the landscape, farming, whatever. There's going to be instances though where, you might either want to build a garage or build a barn extension. These are special circumstances that we work through all the time. And like Allison said, your best bet is to give us a call or do the pre-con. It's free, and we can tell you. In most cases, it really just comes down to, could you move that barn back, 10 meters, or could you flood-proof that garage, for example? We don't really see a lot of negative or restrictions when it comes to, farming activities in these areas. But I mean, the biggest part here, especially and I'm sure if you can see my cursor, but let's say you do sell your land to a developer in the future, we want to make sure that if new homes are going to be built in these areas, that they're going to be built safely, they're going to be built sustainably, and that the people that are going to live there are not going to be susceptible to flooding and erosion, right? And same thing if you're in an existing developed area, right? We don't want any new development to then impact people who already have homes in this area, right? So, even a small shoreline project might not have a big impact, but large fill in the wrong area could have really big impacts for your neighbors. And that's what we want to work through with you, especially, the best bet is before you build or before you do something. Give us a call and we can help you out there. I did also include, or we included rather, the contact for the city of Ottawa for this project. Obviously, in most cases, you don't submit your building permit to us. You're going to your municipality to, build your addition, build your garage, build your new set of homes. And because this will go into zoning, there will be a checkpoint where the city checks with us to help engage with you better. But we're always welcome. Check with us first. It's free. It costs you nothing and can save you a lot of time, especially if it's a simple solution to, better build your project. Any other examples that we could walk through, Allison? I was looking to the comments and I see some, but not question related. So I don't know if anyone's watching and you wanted to drop us a quick comment that we can address while we're here. But maybe, Allison, is there a couple more examples we can walk through?
That would be the easiest if people are on the line and they have something specific to speak to. I guess in the past when we've done these open houses, we do hear all kinds of different things. And I'm glad you brought up the agricultural land because there's no impact on, being able to farm and being able to work on your tile drainage and all these different types of things. But where you are looking to create like a structure or something more significant, that's where you're going to want to pre-consult early. That's where you may want to go through the property inquiry service if you're looking at purchasing land. That's a nice service because you get everything in writing, you get all the details. We also have really sophisticated data request services as well. So we can provide all kinds of different information that you might need depending on your profession. I do find it challenging. We know we have approximately 30 or 40 people listening in, but we don't know exactly what your needs or your special interests are. So without that, I can't think of any other examples I wanted to go through.
Yeah, sure. And this is why we are really hoping that if you have specific questions, I mean, let's do this one-on-one. So we've included a link on the slide. It's the same link that was included in your project letter. It's just a quick form that we're going to ask you to fill out. And we're just looking to know when would be best to meet with you and what method would be best to meet with you. Because like we've said, we really love that one-on-one interaction where we can physically zoom into your property, answer any questions you might have, and offer any advice that we can at the time. So if you're interested in learning more, if you have a specific question, feel free to go to that link, fill out the survey, let us know when would be best. We are taking meetings between November 16th and 27th, and we're doing that so we can kind of get all the feedback, wrap some things up, and if there's anything we want to explore, we want to give ourselves some time to do that before we provide this to the city. So just to be clear on next steps, I mean, we're hoping to engage with anyone who's interested. Let us know. After that time, we're going to peer review those comments and take a look at our models and draft maps. Once we're satisfied and once the city's satisfied, we'll provide it to the city for their zoning schedules, and we'll provide it to our board so that they can adopt it as well, so that we can actually use it in our development review process. And I don't see any other questions, Allison, other than a positive note, which we really do appreciate, guys. So with that, I think we'll end the call, unless, no, I'm looking and I don't see anything. So, I mean, with that, I mean, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for welcoming us into your home at 7 o'clock on a weekday. Allison and I are still in the office, but I think we will be running home right after this. But if there are any questions, I mean, us and especially our engineering team are looking forward to speaking one-on-one.
I see one quick question, John, before we call it a day, which is when can I see where can I see the maps online?
Sure, yeah. And so in that same link that I have on the screen here, which is in the event description on the video, nation.ottawa.ca/natural-hazard-mapping-meetings, but it's the same link that's in your letter. Just go there. The maps are included there, as well as the request for a meeting. And then once they're approved and done and everyone's happy, they will also go on our Geoportal, which is our online mapping tool that's right on the front page of our website. So you can go there, you can click that, and you can type in your property address, and any regulations or any sorts of features that we have mapped are available for viewing there as well. But of course, I mean, just give us a call if you'd like to chat further. We'd be happy to speak with you.
Okay, so I see one more question from Annie and Greg. We see a red line near our property. Can we put the shed in our backyard? So I need to see the map again, just to make sure I check the legend.
Shall we assume Findlay Creek?
I'm assuming it's the pink line. So Annie and Greg, I would suggest if you're seeing that near your property that we might want to set up a time just to chat with you and make sure. But generally the regulated area, if the area you're looking to put the shed is within that zone, you would need to come and get a permit before you would work on that, and we'd be able to chat through with you what that would entail. So what you want to look at is if you're in the yellow line, or if you're in the red line, or if you're outside of the red line. So it sounds like Annie and Greg are saying that they're near Cedar Creek. So if you're amenable to it, we would probably take a note of your names and reach out to you either by email just to set up a quick time that we could actually zoom in on your property if that works for you. It's just a little difficult at the scope of these maps, but if it's a project you're looking at doing before the snow flies, we should set that up soon. And if you're looking at doing it next year, then that's not as much of a rush, but we can still have a chat.
See another one. Red lines seem to go around the ditches when cleaning ditches have a substantial effect. I mean, this is something that is taken into account when we do our modeling. Obviously, different municipal drains, different streams are going to have different regular maintenance standards. And so when we do those models, those standards are taken into account. I don't know, Allison, if you want to speak further on that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. Municipal drain cleanouts are certainly something that we're very familiar with, working through the municipal drain superintendents. I'm pretty sure the way that it's laid out, it wouldn't have a big effect. We're kind of looking at things on it's quite a large scale. But I will definitely make a note of that and be sure to follow up with our engineering team. And if the name is accurate, we can look you up and follow up with you individually. Derek's got a follow-up question about his property that has been backfilled. So filling the floodplain is definitely something that is a complex process. And it gets back to what we were talking about. It's not just necessarily the impact on your property, it's how that filling would affect the upstream and downstream properties. So if you choose to fill your property, you might raise the floodplain on someone else's property. So it becomes a bit of a complicated engineering exercise. And that's part of what South Nation does, is try to protect all of the people living along that watercourse to make sure that no one property owner's actions would negatively impact someone else. So filling your property is something, again, that we would want to have a good conversation with you one-on-one to talk about what the options are. But it's something that if it's at a large scale, it could definitely have a negative impact on others. So we want to make sure that that obviously doesn't happen. So we'll take a note of that and reach out to you. I assume with the names provided that we'll be able to find you on our list of people who are invited. If not, John's mentioned many ways that you can reach out and connect with us to set up a time to chat. So I appreciate those questions. Those are great questions and absolutely relevant to what we're talking about tonight.
I'll just scroll to the last slide, and if a question pops up while I scroll, we'll take it. And if not, I think I will we'll close. Okay. Well, I mean, like we said, thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. But really seriously, if you have questions, let's connect in person. Let's go through those maps in detail so you can also see, your property in detail as well. So with that, we'll close. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it. And check out that project webpage for any additional details you might need.